I am Nathan Case, and this is Security Fundamentals. This webinar is really about the top 10 list that Steve Schmidt gave last year at reInvent in 2019. You will note that it says Security Geek. I am a security geek. Currently, I work as a security strategist for AWS. Kind of brings into who I am. I've been here for 4 years. I've been a ProServe consultant. I have been a solutions architect, specifically a specialist solutions architect focused on security. I've very much enjoyed my time here at AWS, and the thing I enjoy most about being here, frankly, is the ability to help customers. When a customer has a security event, I am one of the people that gets to go out and help you. I am honestly very excited and honored to be one of those people. I get to help you be your best self on your worst day, as Andrew Krug puts it. As we get into this, that kind of brings us to the list. We talk a little bit about this list to begin with, but that's great, but who cares? Where did this list come from? Well, this top 10 list that Steve Schmidt gave to the field, or gave at reInvent, really came from the field. It came from people who are working with our customers every day, whether that be TAMs, professional services, or solutions architects. And a lot of these folks actually work on a day-to-day basis in the well-architected framework. So that's something that you can go look up and read. It helps a lot of people. I specifically focus on the security portions of it, obviously. But as we look at this, and we try to work through what you can do to make your accounts more secure on AWS, it's not a bad place to start. It's actually a really good place to start. And as we look at this list, a lot of the things that are on this list come out of things that get missed in well-architected. Also, this list comes from support teams. We have one of the best support teams around, frankly, in my opinion anyway, for AWS. I get to work with the support team quite a bit. I have a lot of friends on the support team. They help us out and help our customers out all the time. I have the honor, again, of helping out with our customers when they have a security event. And part of this is handoffs from our support team. The support team deals with our customers when they have a security event to begin with. And most of the time they can handle it and fix it and help that customer get into a more stable, secure place. And let's be honest, this list comes from those events. It comes from those interactions, both with support and field teams, and frankly, even from people like me that go and actually help customers. And when we look at those events, it's, not a huge number, but still the things that happen in those events, we feel like we can bring forward in this list and actually help a bunch of customers all at once. So as we go through this list, remember that most of our customers actually could need this. Even if you don't, and it's really good. I'm happy that you don't need this. But if you do, maybe you should look at this. And maybe this will give you another moment to think about why you're not doing it. So let's get into the list. So Carrie Fisher. This is one of the quotes that was on Steve's original slides. And I got to admit, in the last year, a lot of things have happened. One of the many, many things, or some of the many, many things that have happened in 2019 and to now, we had 1,680 announcements on the What's New page. That's a lot of stuff. And as you look at all of that stuff, it does make you wonder, well, what should I do? What should I do in security? What should I do to make my AWS implementation more secure? And as we look at this, well, Steve gave us a quick top 10 list, right? Now, that's the list that we talked about originally when we talked about things that come from the field. And this list is pretty straightforward, really, when you get right down to it. This list deals with 10 things that we feel like everybody should be doing. Now, we're going to make a couple of changes, and I apologize. But when we talked about this originally, number 8 was guard duty. Well, realistically, we have a lot of other services now that do findings, and we should really start taking action on all of the services that have findings, not just guard duty. So that's kind of our main one, and we'll get into exactly how to do that, and I'll actually show you a quick demo about how to set that up. We have being involved in dev cycle. Well, let's be honest. Everybody should be involved in the dev cycle. I get it. I know that most security people aren't the most loved person in the dev room, and I understand. Being a security person and being a developer, I understand how that dichotomy works. If you're the security person, you're used to telling those developers, no, you can't do that. And those developers are used to being told, no, you can't do that. In this scenario, we want to make sure that not only do we point out these other technical things and sometimes process things in the other 9 items here, but we also want to make sure that you start thinking about the way you can improve the process of being involved in dev. So as a security team or as a development team, figure out how you can involve the other people in your organization in what you do. And if you're a developer, this means that this is probably something that you're going to have to focus on every day. Now, there are some other things here, obviously. So the short-term things, the things that you can do that shouldn't take much time, are these things. Accurate account info, use MFA, limit security groups, take actions on service findings, and being involved in the dev cycle. Now, I get it. If we were standing in a room, there'd be like 10 people that just stand up at this point and go, come on. Being involved in dev cycle takes a lot longer than just a little bit of time. And that's fair. But on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't really take all that much time. It's a relationship, and it's something that you need to keep working on. For those of us who are all stuck at home at this point, your marriage is one of those things. You need to take time and work on your marriage. You need to take time and work on your dev cycle. So it's kind of one of those kind of neat things that it takes time, it takes effort, and you have to focus on it long term. It's not something that just happens and you can forget about it. As we talk about some of these other things, it's something that you do once, or it's something that you need to think about once. Account info. Probably only that one time you need to think about that account info, but you should really check it ongoing and evaluate whether or not your account info is still accurate. Maybe you do it once a year, maybe you do it once every 6 months. That's an operational choice that you'll have to make. As we talk about this, though, there are some things that take a little bit longer. So what are those things that take a little bit longer? Well, we have no hard coding secrets. We have intentional data policies. We have centralized AWS logs, validate IAM roles, and rotate your keys. Now, rotate your keys is a little bit of an overloaded term here. When we talk about rotating your keys, are we talking about your KMS keys? Are we talking about your HSM keys? Are we talking about your user data? Are we talking about AWS keys and secret keys? Well, realistically, we should be rotating all of our keys at some level. There are some discussions around what's a good time to do it, when you should do it, when you shouldn't do it. And a lot of that will depend on a blog post that we'll be writing here in a little bit, and we'll happily go into that. I'm not going to touch on that so much today, but I want you to know that there is a blog post coming about that. Now, what we will be touching on today is intentional data policies. We'll talk a little bit about centralizing CloudTrail logs, but not so much, and validating IAM roles, but again, not so much. We only have an hour's worth of time, and the reality is that I have to squeeze in as much as I can, and the best I think I can do today is, frankly, the easy things, the things that you can do quickly. Now, it doesn't mean that these 5 things are less important. It just means that it takes a little bit longer to describe them, and it takes a little bit longer to demonstrate what you should actually do. So hopefully in another webinar, we'll actually go into each of these. And I know that we're doing some of these in a blog already. So all of that's actually going to happen too. It's just not going to happen today in this hour. So I apologize. Moving forward, however, these things are things that you're going to spend time on repeatedly, kind of like we talked about. Being involved in dev cycle is a relationship. It's going to take constant effort, care, and feeding so that you can make sure that that relationship stays strong. You need to make sure that your relationship with your developers and your relationship with security is strong enough so that you take each other seriously and respect each other. It's something that takes time to earn, and it's something that takes effort for care and feeding, and it's something that we want to make sure that you do. Validating IAM roles is something that will always be there. It's something that whenever you release code, whenever you do a new release for your application, you need to go back and validate those IAM roles and make sure that they're still what they're supposed to be. Ideally, you're doing that programmatically. We won't talk about that today, but again, in a future blog, we will. Rotating your keys. It's something that never goes away. You need to make sure that you get away from having keys in general as far as your users go. So I get that 3 and 9 kind of seem like they're diametrically opposed, but they're really not. Not everybody can get, and not every application can easily get to no hard coding secrets. That's not where everybody is. However, if you aren't there and you do have some long-term keys and secret keys that you need to have or need to rotate, please, by all means, rotate them. Don't just continue to use the same ones. Set up a system in which you can rotate them. Now, we talk a little bit about that in the blog, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a subsequent blog. That's about all we're going to say about it for today. So, moving on. The top 10 list and things that you should do. So to begin with, we're going to talk about accurate account info. And it's pretty straightforward, but still, let's talk about it. So this is what it looks like. What should or shouldn't we do? Well, realistically, we need to make sure that we have both the root email address and appropriate account info on this screen. We should have account info in each of these contacts. Why should we have account info in each of these contacts? Because each of these contacts have different things that they get emailed about. Not only should you have an email address in your billing contact, but you should also have one in operations and security. This is important. We need to make sure that these contacts don't go to just one person. As we do this, we want to make sure that we've also set up systems outside of AWS, potentially in SIMs, or inside AWS if we want to go ahead and have an SNS topic about this, that tell us when something bad happens. And that's kind of one of these billing things that comes up, right? We may well have something that we need to focus on that's billing related. Well, it would be really nice if AWS had a way to contact you about billing related things. So let's go ahead and set that up. Now, we also want to make sure that if we can, it shouldn't just be a single individual's email address. Or if it is a single mailbox, then multiple people should be able to check it. Well, why is that? So I can tell you from my personal experience that there have been a lot of times when someone is able to go ahead and do something to an account, and invariably the person that would have gotten that email, yeah, they're on vacation or they're not able to get their email this weekend. Because that happens, we want to make sure that there's more than that, just that one person that's able to get that email. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. So we're going to go over here and we're going to see what that looks like. As we go up here, and I'm going to have to block some of this out, apologies. We're going to go to my account and we're going to give it a moment. And as this spins up, we see our account settings, and that's great. We want to see our account settings. Cool. What we also see is our alternate contacts. If I go ahead and hit edit here, I can go ahead and put in full names. In this case, if it's billing, maybe I am the bookkeeper. Maybe I am the CFO. Oops. Maybe I'm somebody else that has to do this, but the important part here is that we have an email address and a phone number. Now, as you look at this, there is something that you need to think about. You need to understand whether you want to have a phone number attached to these particular billing contacts, or other contacts, if you'd like. Some of that decision needs to be made internally, and it's an internal process decision. Well, how are you going to be sure that you have the same phone number today as you do tomorrow, as you do 6 months from now, as you do 5 years from now? And realistically, as we've seen repeatedly in technology, those things change. And as those things change, we want to make sure you have the ability to change with them. So realistically, is this something that you call once and done? Well, you can. You can go ahead and put those contacts in there. If you put things in there that could change or can change, you need to make sure you add in your runbook the ability to go back and fix these things. So if you do have an operational runbook, and please have an operational runbook, you can go back and watch my reInvent talk from last year or the year before and learn what runbooks are. But you should have to have this in your runbook for when you change or update your email addresses or when you change your email server. These things need to be updated and evaluated on an ongoing basis. All right. So now we're going to go back to the talk. So as we get into this, we need to talk about MFA. Now, MFA is kind of one of those sticky wickets, right? As we look at MFA, it's really a good thing to use. Why is it a good thing to use? Because, well, let's be honest. If I steal your password or if someone steals your password, we don't want them to be able to get into your AWS account or other things. I mean, to be fair, I use MFAs on my gaming accounts. Yes, I don't want you to be able to steal my +5 Vorpal sword. And yes, I am that much of a geek. I actually do have a +5 Vorpal sword, but what do I do with it? Well, I sure as heck don't let you steal it, and I don't let you steal it because I have an MFA on my password. If you do manage to steal my password, then you still have to be able to steal my phone and get the MFA token. Now, if you really are a geek, bonus points for stealing the MFA off the screen right now. Now, there are a bunch of different types of MFA devices, right? A lot of people have issues with some of the virtual MFA devices right now. I've talked to a lot of different governments and highly secure companies that are really scared of the virtual devices. And I get it. It's probably not as secure as a hardware device. Certainly, I understand the concept. However, I will point out that it is far more secure than not having one. So if you are dealing with operational issues where you're multinational and you have the need to be on both sides of the planet at once, you know what? It's probably not a bad idea to at very least have a virtual MFA. And certainly it's not providing you as much mitigation as potentially a hardware MFA, but at the same time, it is mitigation. So again, if we look at the way security works, security is all about building up that multi-layered defense. And part of this is adding MFA. So is it more secure or less secure to have virtual MFA? Well, obviously it's more secure. Is it more secure or less secure to have a hardware MFA? Well, that's debatable. It depends on the situation and it depends on the people that are there and the operational things that are going on. Which one's right for you? I wish I could tell you right now and tell you to go do that, but I can't. It depends, sadly. And I know we're not allowed to say that. I drilled into my head as a ProServe consultant, but the reality is that the way that you deal with that is going to matter, and you need to make sure that you deal with it in the way that is appropriate for your company. All right. So I think I've danced around that enough and given you as much specific advice as I can about MFA devices. But remember that when I look at the incidents, the security incidents that I've been involved in, MFA devices would have stopped the vast majority of those incidents from happening. And the fact that those customers didn't have MFA on their accounts, that was an issue. So definitely you should try to figure out what type of an MFA device that you can add to your account. Bonus points for trying to steal the MFA code. It will rickroll you, but it's amusing nonetheless. All right, so limit security groups. We're going to do a little bit of a visual walkthrough on this one because the reality is it's kind of interesting. So we all are frankly really used to seeing this specifically, right? We see this diagram all the time. I use it a lot. Beyond that, it looks like a lot of the Visio diagrams that I've used historically. So we start getting into this and we go, well, you know, today, just for right now, we're not going to focus on all the purple bits. We're just going to focus on the bits that actually have the subnets and the security groups, right? And let's use our imaginations a bit. And we're going to say that we have a 3-tier web app, right? We have a load balancer in the far left over there. We have a web tier or a presentation layer in the middle subnet, and we have our logic tier in the middle subnet. And then we have the database or the data tier in the final right subnet all the way over on the right. Okay? So this is a pretty standard scenario. We've got a load balancer that's handing off left and right, left and right. We're going to either one of the web tier, the presentation layer, right? And those are able to talk to a specific application server. And then from that application server, they're able to go back to that database. Now you'll note that the web application is not able to go back to the data tier, and the application server is the only thing that is able to go back to the data tier, right? Cool. This is generally how we tell you to set it up. But sometimes people want to set it up this way, right? We want to set it up so that we have some sort of a mesh. Is this more secure or less secure than this? More secure or less secure? So this is one of those moments when I really don't like the virtual thing because I would totally have everybody standing up at this point, standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. And we talk about it. And the reality is that depending on how your application is built and the things that you're doing, it may not be any different. I mean, you still have a load balancer in front of everything. And that load balancer is still the only thing able to speak into a web server. And yeah, okay, you've maybe sacrificed some security for having some uptime, maybe, but that's only dependent on how you've actually set up your application and your web system, your presentation layer. So as we get into this, arguably the same, right? We've set up a mesh and maybe we have more uptime this way, and maybe that's a good thing versus this, but it's going to be dependent on who you are and what you're building. Now, is this more secure or less secure than this? Well, geez, yeah, that's less secure, right? Our security group is huge. Well, yeah, okay, it is. But keep in mind that we're only letting in port 443. So from the world at large, everybody that is 0.0.0.0, only port 443 can get in. So that statement is saying that only things that have a public IP address inside of my little subnet here and inside of my little security group can take requests from the world at large. Now, that may mean that the only thing in this subnet or the only thing in the security group indeed is the web layer, is the presentation layer. So did anything really change between this one and this one? Well, okay, maybe not, but most likely it did. And to be fair, we've segmented that database a lot less than it used to be. So as we look at this, that's a lot less secure. Why? Well, you know, at very least, my web front end, my presentation layer doesn't have the load balancer in front of it that it used to over here, right? And that's not wonderful. We'd like to have that load balance there because it does wash some of those requests. And we want to make sure if we want to put a WAF there, we can. And this way would make it hard to do that. So, all right, so this is definitely less secure. But if we start doing things like this and opening up a bunch more ports and having everything in here be able to connect to the internet, well, that's a heck of a lot less secure. Let's not do that at all. But you would be surprised how many times when I'm on an event that this is what I see. Okay? This is one of those things that people do because it's quick and easy. I'm a developer. I want to get this done and I just need it to work. And you know what? I happen to be sitting at my house. Funny thing. And I need to connect with my MySQL server, and it's just easier to add 3306 into that security group right now, and I really don't care. Now, we can argue all day about 3306 and maybe your specific IP address, and is that more or less secure? And I get it. It's obviously less secure, but the reality is if you have 3306 to 000, someone's probably going to get into your MySQL server, especially if your password is admin123. So when we look at this, there's a lot more things that we need to think about compared to way over here, right? Here versus here is a massively different scenario. And as we look at this, we want to make sure that you understand that this is where you should be shooting at, or this, maybe, right? These two choices are the ones that you should be making versus this one. Please don't make this choice. As we talk about limiting security groups, we don't want to be here and we do want to be here. The only thing that we should see in our ports that are open, probably 443, right? Because it is HTTPS, and that's really the thing that we expect web traffic to be on. All right, so I think I've beaten that horse enough. Let's move on. So take action on service findings. This is an interesting one because as we look at it, we want to make sure that you take action on service findings, absolutely. But at the same time, what is a service finding? It used to just be guard duty. We used to just have findings that dealt with guard duty specifically, and that was pretty straightforward, right? I actually did a webinar about a year and a half ago about how to do that. Tom Stickle did a really cool blog that talks about how to deal with multi-account, and we'll show you that in a sec. But the reality is that as things started happening, we started getting more options for findings, right? Now we have Access Analyzer as of reInvent last year. And it's pretty cool. It'll tell you about resources in your account and let you understand what what has access to said resources, right? And those findings come from everything. But where do they go? Well, we also released Security Hub. So Security Hub is a great thing in that it unifies all of this messaging and puts it in one place. And it allows us to go ahead and have some baselines that allow us to look at things like PCI, or it allows us to look at some of the more common expected CIS benchmarks, right? As we look at that, it's a really good reason for Security Hub to exist, because if you have to go ahead and write rules for all of these things, it's going to be a pain. So what does that end up looking like? So as we look at our accounts over here, we end up looking at, right? We're going to go to CloudWatch. And as we open up CloudWatch, we're going to look at the rules that we see here. Now, I apologize. I've got a slow network, Ohio. As we get in here, killing me with the slowness here, folks. We see rules. If we click on rules, we'll see the 3 rules that we have in this account. You'll note that I've already got a Security Hub rule in here. If I open up the Security Hub rule, I've actually got it limited right now just to Security Hub. Now, I can go ahead and edit this, and we can make changes to it so that we can only see specific types of things that come out of Security Hub. Or we can add something like guard duty, or we can add access analyzer. We can do a whole bunch of things with this event pattern. And that's really what this event pattern is all about. So if we go ahead and edit this, we do have the ability to select different event types here, or we can even select different services, right? If we wanted to look at something else, there's nothing stopping us from adding some other service in here if that's interesting to us. The important part here, and the important part about this top 10 item, is that you're having something in this event pattern that is something about Security Hub or the findings that you're going to get from that. And you've got something targeted over here that is most likely an SNS topic. In this scenario, we're going to connect to this SNS topic, and this SNS topic is going to shoot an email to my AWS email address. We'll get to see what that is here in a minute. Again, sorry for the slow network. As we look at this, we have our topic, right? And we see my name down here, and we see that I am confirmed. Do remember that when you sign up and subscribe to an SNS topic, you do need to confirm the subscription. It doesn't just give you the magic ability to subscribe anybody you want to an email as an email target endpoint for obvious reasons. As we look at this, what we're going to do then is say that anything that comes out of that CloudWatch filter is going to go to this SNS topic. And then because of this is going to be emailed to me. And that's great. That's exactly what I want. Now that is like the bare minimum of what we hope for when we talk about having this SNS topic set up, or when we talk about sending findings out to another system. I could just as easily, instead of made this my SNS topic with my name on it, I could have just as easily made this another system, or I could have done something else that pushed this in a different way to an S3 bucket or something else that was able to be grabbed by another automated system. Maybe I've got my SIM grabbing these findings specifically. So as we do this, we need to make sure that we remember CloudWatch. We set up our source, right? And our target being the topic. Now, something that we should make sure that we've done is turning on Security Hub. Turning on Security Hub is a lot like turning on guard duty. You basically just enable it. So as we get in here, we'll see that my brand new account here that I generated just for this topic shows us how to do this. And poof. Now I can go ahead and click Findings on the right once it's done loading. And if I look at these findings, I'm going to see, oh no, I've got a whole bunch of findings and they're high and they're critical and well, no, not really. So I actually turned this on after I had loaded some default findings out of guard duty just to see exactly what would happen. And we have a bunch of things here that are really just because I've got PCI on and because I've got guard duty generating some just general findings. So when we got to the screen, it wasn't empty. But you get the idea. So right now, I would be sent an email about this low severity finding. PCI Lambda 2, Lambda function should function in a VPC. But right now, it's not. And that's okay if I don't have PCI concerns, right? Or it might be okay if my company doesn't have any governance standards that would make that true. But it's important to know that this is true. Now, I may be able to go, or I may want to limit some of the things here in the filter pattern so that those don't all clog up my inbox or clog up my SIM. And that's up to you. The point is, though, that you've actually thought this through and you've arranged for things either in Security Hub or in CloudWatch to send you the appropriate SNS topic emails that you need so that your operations team is able to respond as it appropriately should. So as we get back to our talk here, we want all of these things, use it, to look like this. We want everything to go back to Security Hub, right? If you find yourself with the desire to turn off guard duty or Security Hub because you don't like what you're seeing, please don't. That is a surefire way for me to come and talk to you on a Monday morning. It astounds me the number of people that say, well, I turned on guard duty or I turned on Security Hub and there was an extremely important or critical finding that was bright red and it scared me, so I turned off guard duty. That's not the right response. If you have a critical finding and you don't know what it is or you don't know what's going on, we have a website for that. And that website will go through and explain to you exactly what you can do with that and what it means. And should you call support or should you get some help? Now, Tom Stickle, way back in 2017, actually wrote a blog about how to do this across multiple accounts. It's a good blog. I get that it's 2 years old, but it's kind of the point. This has been around for a long time. Automate these things. Make sure that you understand that as much automation as you can is probably good as long as you've talked to your operations people and as long as your company understands what automations you're going to be put in place. So you do always have to make sure that when you get into automation, you look at some discussion, some process and procedure. Absolutely. But we need to also make sure that we take as many humans out of the loop as we can. Because let's be honest, humans are great unless you want consistency. As we get into this, we get to the final one, being involved in dev cycle. So I've warned you that you're going to get bored with this statement, but the reality is that this is kind of the old version of what we were talking about. So I remember actually using this slide in 2016 and 17 when we started talking about DevOps. And we want everybody to be involved in the dev cycle. Why do we want people to be involved in the dev cycle? Because let's be honest, if we look at a business and we look at the development that has to happen, we also then have to deal with some of the security that has to happen. And if we have to have development and we have to have security, chances are we have to have operations. Why? Because developers generally don't want to operate the things that they've built long term, and security people want to make sure that those things operate securely, and operations people don't necessarily want to have to think about security and development all day long. So we end up with three types of operations or three types of things that happen, right? And as we look at these things, they all kind of have a fourth. And that fourth thing is we need to make money, or we need to continue to survive, or we need to continue to make this business thrive. As we look at that, generally this equates to ship it on time. If I'm a developer, I need to make sure that I ship my product when I'm supposed to ship it, right? And so we've got to build it faster. That's just what happens. And that kind of begins to bring in this pull, this push and pull that we have between development and security. Because security wants to make it more secure, not faster. They care about making things more secure. And then operations wants it to be more stable. But sometimes, to be fair, when you develop something and I want it fast, sometimes I sacrifice operational stability. And maybe I understand that I've got to reboot it every night and midnight. And I've been in companies where that's legitimately the choice. Agreed, not a great choice, but it happens. So if it happens and we understand it happens, well, how do we get around that? Well, if none of these 3-4 groups are involved with each other, it doesn't happen. No one talks to each other, and we end up throwing development artifacts over the wall for operations to have to implement, and the security finds out about it last second, and business is already selling it. So as we do this, we want to make sure that we focus on something more like this, where we're all working together for a full business model. That means that sometimes, yeah, that the C-level people or the VPs, they need to work with development so that development understands the things that actually matter to everyone. That means that operations needs to talk to security and development and needs to be involved in some of the development choices. That means that security needs to have that relationship with development and operations so that everybody understands what they're supposed to be doing. As we get into this is really kind of a touchy-feely thing. I get it. It's not really the normal stuff that I would talk about, but the reality is this is how it works better. And I will be honest with you. Even here at Amazon, there are times when development pushes back on security and security has to push into operations and we all have a fight. And you know what? It's kind of cool because afterwards we can all deal with the fact that, yeah, we came to a good solution and yeah, we all had to pull hard and we all had to deal with something. But the reality is, at the end of the day, if we talk to each other and we work together, we end up with a much better product than if we didn't. So please, security, be involved in the development cycle. Operations, be involved in the development cycle. Please. All right. So I don't want you to forget about the long-term efforts. We are kind of running out of time though. So I'm going to go ahead and show them again. Remember that no hard coding secrets is important. If you can get your applications there so that they're not using those keys and secret keys, that would be ideal. If you're not using passwords in your MySQL passwords in your code and you're not having to write those down, because let's be honest, occasionally they end up in GitHub, that would be great. Intentional data policies. Intentional data policies is important because when we think about things that get lost, if you don't know where your data is and you don't know what types of data you have, it doesn't really matter that it's lost because it's all important and it's all critical. It may be that your website is now on the internet. That's what we expected to happen. That's okay. But we certainly don't want our PII to be found on the internet. So we need to make sure that we make that distinction and we have a plan to appropriately set aside those data silos into appropriately secured places. Now that might be S3 and we go ahead and secure those buckets appropriately. That might be something else entirely, but we need to understand what that is. We should centralize our CloudTrail logs or other logs as well. Now we're going to talk about that in a different blog and I'll probably do a webinar about that one alone, but we've got a lot of blogs about it already. The problem is it can be hard because we don't always know what type of logs we need. And that's an honest reality. Sometimes you need different logs than you expected. And that's one of those runbook items that just comes up and you have to deal with it. Validate IAM roles. We didn't talk about validating IAM roles in any of the demonstrations today, and I'm sorry. We really need to. That's going to come out in the blog here in a little bit. And I know the guy that's going to do that. And then we have rotate your keys. I actually have a special guest that's going to help me write that blog and do that webinar. I will keep you in the dark about who that is, but it's going to be pretty neat. And I hope to have that done here in about another month. So that's the end of the talk. I hope that helps you guys. I hope this webinar is useful to you. And I hope that you found the at least first 5 things out of this webinar useful and you can go implement them today. Thank you.